Comment estat? Bonjour. Good day to everyone joining us. Welcome to this important informational webinar on the upcoming Global Interfaith Conference, Pagtatanim, Sowing Seeds of Faith and Solidarity for the Philippine People's Struggle for Peace. My name is the Reverend Dr. Patricia Lisson, Vice Chair of the International Coalition for Human Rights in the Philippines, ICHRP, and a member of the International Interfaith Network. It is an honor to gather today across traditions and geographies in shared faith and purpose to deepen our collective commitment to justice and peace in the Philippines. Over the past years, ICHRP has mobilized global faith communities through initiatives such as Investigate PH in 2021, the International Observers Mission of 2022, and the Interfaith Learning Tour of 2023, and the International People's Tribunal of 2024. These efforts have amplified the voices of the oppressed and strengthened our resolve to accompany the Philippine people in their struggle for justice, land reform, and freedom from state repression. Today, the call is urgent. The Philippines face deepening crises: militarization, systemic poverty, and repression. Now is the time for another bold wave of interfaith action and global solidarity. This year, 2025, marks a Jubilee year, rooted in biblical tradition as a time of restoration, justice, and freedom. It calls us to return the land to the dispossessed, free the captives, and forgive debts. These themes resonate deeply with the current struggles of the Philippine farmers, indigenous people, fisher folks, human rights defenders, and the poor. The recent passing of Pope Francis, the People's Pope, remind us of these values. He consistently uplifted the marginalized and the poor, those now under renewed threat in the Philippines. Ironically, even as President Marcos Jr. attended the Pope Francis funeral in Rome, his regime continued military exercise with the US, continued to implement human rights violations, and is seeking international legitimacy as a human rights state. It is precisely at moments like this that people of faith must rise to speak truth to power. In response, ICHRP, in partnership with the International Interfaith Network and the Ecumenical Voice for Peace and Human Rights, EcuVoice, is convening a global interfaith conference on human rights in the Philippines, to be held in Rome, June the 27th, 28th, 2025. Today's webinar is a preparatory step toward that gathering. Together, we will explore the current human rights situation in the Philippines, the prophetic and pastoral responsibility of interfaith communities, and the need for united interfaith movement grounded in justice and solidarity. This is a moment of pagamatin, of planting seeds of truth, courage, and community. As the ICC investigates the former President Duterte, this conference offers a vital occasion to raise silenced voices and defend human dignity. Thank you for being here. May this session inspire and equip us to become co-sowers of justice and hope. And so I open our webinar this morning by inviting the Reverend Chris Ferguson, the co-chair of the International Interfaith Network, to give us a reflection responding to the realities of the people against the realities of the people in the Philippines against systematic poverty, etc. So Chris, take it away.
Thank you so much. And thank you, Patricia, for that already precise and inspiring introduction. I think the important coming together is the confluences are that in this moment, we did talk about this seminar today, or the webinar, as taking up Pope Francis's call. And really, the point is that we don't want to focus in this moment, particularly on Francis, but rather take the energy that Pope Francis and the moment of his passing allowed us to reinvigorate and grasp again the energies that the interfaith communities, ECU Voice, and iChirp in general has been able now to understand in a deepening situation, to name from both a faith perspective and from a people's perspective, why all the worsening situation, the deepening poverty, the exploitation, the violence, the militarization and foreign intervention leads us precisely to understand this is the moment where we must foreground peace, and that not only combat injustice in general, but seek peace led by the people in very specific terms and knowing their deep interrelation. There will be no peace, we are taught, without justice. The road to peace must be led by the people from below, the poor and the suffering, as peacemakers, and in turn must address the root causes of peace. Now, the iChurch contribution to this has started in this chapter of the history of the Philippines by addressing all the ravages of Duterte's war on drugs and all the repressive up-ramping of militarized injustice through a process called Investigate PH, which was launched because of the inability of the international mechanisms for peace and human rights to actually thoroughly investigate the situation. And the conclusion in 2022 of the Investigate PH was that the historic conditions of domination by foreign powers, poverty, landlessness, exploitation, repression, and rebellion of Filipino society have been exacerbated by the anti-people's policies of the Duterte government. In other words, the entire focus of focusing on human rights abuses and the violations of international law is to only understand them as expressions of mechanisms to maintain structures and systems of oppression that have been upheld, expanded, and deepened by a three-pronged strategy of militarized and economic domination. In the report, we characterize this as the three war fronts perfected by Duterte, but by the way, continued by the Marcos Jr. regime. A war against the poor under the guise of war on drugs or war against crime. Actually, the repression of the poor themselves, so they could not overturn the conditions under which they suffer and labor, which have their roots in structures that benefit the very few at the expense of the very many. The war against dissent under the guise of fighting communist terrorism, all the techniques of red tagging, trumped up charges, imprisonment, intimidation, the war on the Moro people, and by the war on all self-determination of peoples in the Philippines under the guise of participating in an international war on terror, a US-led campaign of imperialism and domination. We know the situation is getting worse and more highly militarized, leading to this moment where the Filipino people and faith communities of all types are called again to address the root causes of this repression and the violations of human rights and international humanitarian law. And we do so by mobilizing for and insisting on a just and lasting peace, and knowing the way to ending the suffering and domination of peace is peace, and that peace is the product of justice that addresses and dismantles the oppressive structures of colonialism, neoliberal racial capitalism, militarism, and imperialism that impede the Filipino people's right to justice, peace, and self-determination, free of poverty and oppression. Now, in all these things, we have found a clear focus in the life and ministry of Pope Francis. He simply came in a moment to remind us that that the dramatic suffering and oppression of the Filipino people, and read here also the people of Gaza, the people of Congo, Ukraine, Sudan, Myanmar, all the suffering people burdened with oppression, calls for solidarity. Fundamentally, Pope Francis focused the imperatives of faith, all peoples of faith and all people of goodwill, on solidarity with the poor, but not in a disconnected way from the realities of the roots of that poverty. Very importantly, he used his international ministry to make visible that which we have been struggling for a long time, to make visible the witness and wisdom of the poor themselves. And what are these things that are being lifted up? That solidarity is more, to use his own words, than a few sporadic acts of generosity. It is the call to act against the structural causes of poverty. And yes, he says there's an invisible thread joining every injustice. And we are overall either complicit or courageous. And that, it isn't that he gave us ideas we didn't have, but he encouraged us to be people of courage in this quest for addressing root causes. Secondly, that it's the poor and oppressed themselves who will be the blessed peacemakers. And churches and religions are called to follow the lead of the organized poor in their attempts to end their own suffering. Three, that there will be no peace without justice, and the causes of injustice, like poverty, landlessness, repression, and ecological destruction, are directly rooted in colonialism, racial militarized capitalism, foreign-driven imperialism, and we must have the courage to name these evils explicitly and to work to dismantle them. That these are faith imperatives that we were reminded by Francis as well, and this is my own tradition. The Reformed churches have insisted always that economic, ecological, gender, and social injustices are all linked to the same root causes. Peace requires us, number 5, to mobilize and resist, both from the grassroots level, led by the people themselves, and by transforming institutional structures and systems that promote domination, death, and do not promote liberation and life. That all these imperatives are rooted in a faith vision, all religions and all justice-seeking people, understanding the peace, justice, and harmony of creation are, for believers, rooted in God's good gifts, but for all, rooted in the belief that the power of life is stronger than death. So, in the final word, we are also, as Patricia said strongly, reflecting. And sorry that I am not able to take all my time to deepen the reflection on the Jubilee year, but just to make a few comments that our time and space is inspired in having this conference in Rome around this vision of the Jubilee year. And this, in the tradition rooted in Leviticus, articulated in Isaiah 61 for Christian and Jewish believers, and in Luke 4, very strongly in the Christian tradition, has been proclaimed as a pilgrimage of hope. This biblical vision is one that inspires us to see hope as action, pilgrimage in this sense, which for us means mobilization for peace. That hope is an actively engaging not simply in optimistic predictions of change that God may bring, or in wishful thinking that God will fix all of this without us. Jubilee is a vision that reminds us that we must mobilize every 7 years, every 50 years to make right that which is broken, to dismantle the unjust systems, and they're given names: systems of slavery, of land grab, of marginalization of workers, of imprisoning people who dissent. That these issues of poverty, landlessness, repression are directly rooted in structures that they themselves must be overturned. And in the Jubilee vision, we are all called to use strong biblical language to be co-redeemers. There is a role for us in the returning of the land, letting the land rest, the freeing of slaves, the releasing of captives. This moment of restoration is a moment of movement, not rest for us, but active engagement with God's hope and conviction. And that the time is now. Ending with a quote from Luke 4:16. The Spirit of the Lord is upon us because God has anointed us to bring good news to the poor, to proclaim release to the captives, recovery of sight to the blind, to let the oppressed go free, and to proclaim the year of the Lord's favor, which, by the way, means the year of Jubilee. No more debt, no more slavery, and that we together sow seeds of hope. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris, for that very clear call to action, and that action leads to hope, and hope calls us to more action as we enter this Jubilee year of when we address and deal with the whole the sense of systematic poverty, but returning land to the landless, returning hope to those who are oppressed is such a key message to our found in our work, and that the energy continues as we think and reflect on the Jubilee year, and also the life and ministry of Pope Francis and other people of faith who have led the way. There is no peace without peace and justice together. Thank you. Let us move to Kedge Andre, who is the member of the Student Christian Movement in the Philippines. So Kedge, please, is going to give us an overview of the actual situation on the ground in the Philippines. Go ahead, Kedge. Nice to have you this morning. In your case, this evening.
Good day, everyone. Am I audible?
Yes, you are.
So I have a presentation. So hopefully it will be presented in the screen. Okay, so my task is to present the signs of the times that the Filipino people are facing. So next slide. So again, I'm Kedge Andres. I'm the National Chairperson of the Student Christian Movement of the Philippines. So many of us are familiar with Matthew. Oh, I forgot to translate this. Many of us are familiar with Matthew chapter 16, verses 1 to 3, where Jesus Christ scolded the Pharisees and Sadducees for challenging him, but not knowing the signs of the times. So as people of faith, we are challenged and we are reminded by our Savior that we must be grounded on the realities, especially that we are conducting a solidarity with the Philippines. So next slide. So I'll be presenting a presentation. It's more focused on the youth, but of course, it is pervasive on the many sectors that are experiencing poverty and historic crisis in our country. So next. So the even when you are born, you are faced with a crisis. So every Filipino right now, even if you're born, you'll be faced with about more than $2,600 worth of individual debt if you compute it with the total debt of the country, which is around 300 billion in dollars. So we pay these kinds of debt through austerity, where there is 12 billion peso budget cut on education, basic education, and there is 26 billion budget cut on the healthcare services this year in a country where 6 out of 10 Filipinos die without ever seeing a doctor. Next. So 78% of Filipino families say that they are poor or near poor. There are a number of 250,000 to 1 million street children, 60,000 to 100,000 estimated children victims of labor/sex trafficking. And when Marcos took power, hunger was 11%, but now it's 26%. So for this year, it's ironic because it's the year of hope, supposedly, but it's according to a recent survey, 90% of Filipinos are hopeful compared to last year, which is 95%, which is now the 15-year low of Filipinos entering the new year, hopeful. Next. So there are budget cuts where in education, where 9 out of 10 Filipino kids age of 10 cannot read, over 18 million high school graduates do not understand what they read. So there are budget cuts even in these kinds of situation where we are experiencing a historic education crisis. Next. So this is what we call the education ladder. So out of 100 first grade enrollees, only 12 will enter tertiary education because of lack of support and deep Filipino youth the right to education. And out of 100 first grade students, only 7 of them will finish tertiary education. Next. Of course, we are in a situation where the unity, the supposed tandem of Marcos and Duterte are now struggling for power between them. Imagine the hunger rate is higher. There is a historic education crisis, but our leaders are doing what they can to wrestle power from each other, especially under the context of elections. There are separate slates for senator. We are now in the senator elections, and both camps, both the Marcos and Duterte camps, are struggling against each other. So Marcos has made his moves with the impeachment maneuvering against the current Vice President Sara Duterte and the ICC imprisonment of Rodrigo Duterte. This is the important context that we have to remember, because Marcos is trying to make himself a champion against corruption, a champion against the human rights by imprisoning Duterte, by trying to impeach Sara Duterte. But of course, this must be attributed to the people's movement that have been clamoring and moving towards this kind of political development. And of course, we have to expose that despite these actions by the current president, he is powerless. He is continuing actually the human rights and economic crisis within the Philippines. Next. So within schools, there is a curtailment of academic freedom. Many of the youth are not allowed to openly express, to openly organize, and to openly mobilize. Students are being red tagged. Many schools have been camped by scores of military, especially in the University of the Philippines in Mindanao. And there is a threat to reinstate mandatory reserve officers training corps, or became an auxiliary reserve force of the Philippine Army, because they want to make us pawn against the US's war against China. Next slide. So apart from the education crisis and the economic crisis, of course, we are facing historic human rights crisis. Like what I said, Marcos is trying to clean, they're trying to clean their family image, their family name, but statistics and stories do not lie. Continuous human rights violations abound under the current administration, including the drug war, which has not stopped. Next. So, zeroing in on the human rights context, there is still a de facto martial law that Marcos inherited from the past President Rodrigo Duterte, where so many communities, especially in the countryside, are being camped by military agents, by soldiers, where they have been using local halls, even churches, as places to station their barracks. And recently, there have been cases of what we call urban militarization, where urban places, urban poor places here in Manila are now seeing presence of increased military. The NTF-ELCAC has not stopped. They say that they are finished with the communist insurgency, but the budget still remains, the very high budget still remains, continued their red tagging, surveillance, and deception to give aid so that many farmers would be forced to surrender and present themselves as quote unquote rebel surrenderies. Even in schools, many cases have been unearthed where military men have hijacked classes, sent red tagging seminars, and sometimes it triggers children, it triggers the youth because they would blatantly show bodies of slain bodies of rebels in front of the youth within the schools. Draconian laws that were implemented first under Duterte, like the terror law and the Terrorism Financing Prevention and Suppression Act, are still being implemented under Marcos, which has stifled the operations of many non-government and church organizations here in the Philippines. And of course, the continuing violations of international humanitarian law, particularly, for example, with the youth, the screenshot that you are seeing in front of your screens is the case of the extrajudicial killing of children in the Masbate province. Two of them, one is 14 years old, one is 18 years old, and the military paraded fake news that they were rebels. But the community were grounded that they were not rebels, but they were civilian children. Next. Of course, we know that these kinds of economic and political and education crisis are being enacted by the current administration to keep a colonial, commercialized, and repressive system to make the youth veer away from our role to stand with the oppressed and the marginalized, because the Philippines is one of the biggest markets of cheap labor. Before the pandemic, before the lockdown, 6,000 Filipinos leave the country every day on average because of lack of jobs to become cheap labor outside the country. But now it's 7,500 daily average of Filipinos leaving the country because of lack of jobs and to become cheap labor abroad. Next. And of course, we know whose interest prevails because we know that the US wants to consolidate political power here in the Philippines. During the time of Duterte was dilly-dallying between China and the US, but now Marcos is very faithful to the original imperialist master, the United States, especially under the current Trump administration. So from last year, there has been 500 million military assistance package, one of the largest in history. And this will be distributed to the Philippines for the next 5 years. So continuously, if Israel is the #1 recipient of US military aid in the world, the Philippines has been consistent to be the #1 recipient of US military aid in East Asia, in this part of the world. So every year, the presence of US troops and other allies of the US have been increasing. Last year, it was 16,000 from the Balikatan or shoulder-to-shoulder exercises. Now it's 17,000. And not only does this exacerbate the atmosphere of war in the Philippines, but has also worsened human rights and economic violations, like the displacement of more than 6,300 fisher folk in a province north of Manila because of Balikatan exercises being done as of the moment. Next. Of course, we have to name the historic roots that are still pervasively being enacted under the current system in the Philippines, where all these, the economic, the political, educational, health, human rights crises are rooted in the domination, the continued and worsening domination of the Philippines, especially in the midst or in the atmosphere of war, of their under imperialism, of course, feudalism, where 7 out of 10 Filipinos are landless. This is the economic root cause of human rights violations, of many or most human rights violations in the country, because as we all know, human rights violations do not just happen. They are economic because of the extreme landlessness in the Philippines. Many farmers want to struggle against these, but of course, the government being ruled by landlords, by landed families, instead of giving land, instead of improving the lives of farmers, many of them, the government turns into fascism. The government turns into blatant worsening poverty against the situation of the farmers, and of course, bureaucrat capitalism or making the government a business. This is more explicitly being experienced by the Filipino people in the context of the breakup of the Marcos and the Duterte, where their interest against each other is not for the sake of the Filipino people, but of course for the sake of who gets the larger share in the corruption in this very corrupt and very dirty Philippine politics system. So that's the very short, comprehensive, hopefully digestible way of interpreting and explaining the situation in the Philippines right now.
Thank you, Kedge, for that very comprehensive overview, a sign of our times. And what stuck out for me was 26% of the people are hungry. The struggle between the Duterte and the Marcos government is causing terrible effects for the midterm elections, of which red tagging is a key deterrent for people to go and vote. Militarization, the war on drugs still continuing, slain children, cheap labor, and rampant feudalization. It's amazing. The year of Jubilee is very needed, and people of faith need to take action for sure. It is clear, the call is clear. And to still think that we might call this the year of hope. Well, we live in hope. Let us move on. Thank you, Kedge, again for that very comprehensive overview. Let us move to Deaconess Joyous Prim, who will give us a more detailed update for our conference in Rome. So Joyous, I turn it over to you.
Thank you, Patricia. So today, as the world turns its eyes back to Rome with the start of the conclave to elect the new pope, we are turning our eyes to the Philippines to understand and draw attention to the suffering that is happening there, and to not take our eyes off the realities that the people of the Philippines are facing and acts of solidarity and support. And so in light of this, on behalf of the Pagtatanim Organizing Committee, I would like to invite you all to join us for Pagtatanim, sowing seeds of faith and solidarity for the Filipino people's struggle for peace. This two-day conference will happen on Friday, June 27th and Saturday, June 28th, and will feature opportunities to listen and learn from faith leaders in the Philippines, those in ministry with many of the communities Kedge talked about. We will also have victims of human rights violations and human rights defenders who have been targeted by both former President Duterte and current President Marcos Jr. to come and share their testimonies, as we also discuss the roadblocks to just and lasting peace in the Philippines. As we are aiming to build solidarity, we will have a panel of faith leaders from various countries sharing on their lived experiences of witnessing and accompanying the Filipino people's struggle for a just and lasting peace. And we will also have various co-sponsors and ecumenical groups sharing their responses on solidarity. As this conference is not just an opportunity to learn, but to really come together as people of faith to answer the call of the Filipino people to support their struggles for just and lasting peace. We will have workshops to determine what's next, including concrete next steps that we can commit to as we strengthen our solidarity. Topics will include how to strengthen our witness and accompaniment of communities, advocacy and lobbying at the local, national, and international levels, and much more. The Sunday after the conference on June 29th, we have been invited to join the Catholic Filipino Mass in Rome, and then we'll gather that afternoon for a prophetic public witness. This conference is not possible without the support of our co-sponsors for the conference. These include the World Council of Churches, the World Communion of Reformed Churches, the World Christian Student Federation Asia Pacific, the United Methodist General Board of Church and Society, the Disciples in Christ and United Church of Christ Common Board of Global Ministries, the United Church of Canada, the Anglican Church of Canada, and the Kairos Canadian Ecumenical Justice Initiative. Now, if your organization wants to join our co-sponsor list, there is still time. Now, just for a few logistical points, the registration link has been posted in the chat box for you to visit and learn more and register for the conference. For individuals, the conference registration fee is $75. And for representatives of faith institution, the registration is $115. Registration costs go to cover the cost of the conference, including breakfast and lunch on both Friday and Saturday, coffee, snacks, as well as to support the cost of the Filipino faith leaders, human rights defenders, and victims of human rights violations to join us from the Philippines. Do take note, though, we will not be providing housing. However, once you register, we will share with you the travel advisory, which includes hotels and a nearby campsite to the venue, The travel advisory also contains the venue address for the conference in case you wish to look up alternative housing options for yourself. We encourage folks who are traveling to Rome to coordinate with others from your regional or country iChurch chapter because we understand housing.
I think Joyce has frozen. Joyce? I think Joyce was going to say that housing can be rather expensive.
During the year of the Jubilee is not the Philippines.
Thank. Are you finished? You froze there for a minute, Joyce. So sorry. I was stepping in there. Thank you, Joyce, for all that information. And if you have more questions, please just reach out to us and we will try to address those questions on logistics and registration, etc. So just now I'd like to turn and invite Colleen Moore, who is a member of the United Methodist Church in the U.S., the General Board of Church and Society. Colleen.
Thank you so much, Patricia. Hi, everyone. Good to see you. As Patricia said, my name is Colleen Moore. I'm the Director of Peace with Justice at the General Board of Church and Society, which is the social justice agency of the United Methodist Church. While I'm sad that I unfortunately won't be able to attend the Pagtatanim conference in June, GBCS is a proud co-sponsor of the conference and definitely supports the goals that have been talked about today. So the United Methodist Church's pivotal resolution on peace and democracy in the Philippines calls on the Philippine government to immediately stop illegal arrest and prolonged detention, stop the killings, disappearances, torture, and forced displacement, pursue accountability of those who have committed human rights violations, also calling on them to hold free and fair elections and to resume peace talks by the government. And we also call on other governments like the United States to use their influence to stop these human rights violations, as well as withhold military aid. As so many others have talked about today, faith solidarity for the Philippines is so important right now as the human rights crisis worsens, especially amidst the upcoming elections, alongside escalating militarization, a dangerous U.S.-Philippines relationship as well. It is very clear that we need faith communities to witness and walk alongside the Filipino people in their struggle for a just and lasting peace. We should not stand by while journalists, activists, peace consultants, and even our own faith leaders are being red tagged by the Philippines government and violently attacked by the military simply for working for human rights and justice. I'm also serving as a commissioner for iChirp's International Observers Mission during the 2025 midterm elections in the Philippines, which is coming up on May 12th next week. Even just in the lead up to the midterm elections, we're seeing an escalation in red tagging and a heightened number of cases of election-related killings, especially in rural areas such as the northern province of Abra and the Bangsamoro Autonomous Region in Muslim Mindanao and southern Philippines. This is while political dynasties and elites are jockeying for power, all at the expense of the people. It's so important for faith communities to call attention to the lack of free, honest, and fair elections, as well as the larger human rights situation in the Philippines. So I also encourage people to be paying attention to when our report comes out, the IOM report comes out after the May 12th elections. And as others have said, it is so significant that this conference in June is taking place during the Jubilee year, a biblical tradition that calls for a year of rest, the freeing of slaves, the forgiveness of debts, and the redistribution of land, especially at this time to honor the legacy of Pope Francis and his work for peace with justice. This call is so relevant to the worsening human rights crisis in the Philippines and to the Filipino people's struggle for land, food sovereignty, social justice, and peace, as well as to all around the world fighting for justice, as all of our struggles are interconnected. in the United Methodist Church in our social principles and in multiple resolutions calls for an end to war and for all countries and all institutions to respect human rights globally. So I hope that everyone here considers attending the Pagtatanim conference in June or becomes a co-sponsor and supports the goals of the conference. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you, Colleen, for that great presentation and a clear explanation of your of the United Methodist commitment and willingness to be a part of this journey. So we would just take a few minutes. If there's a question, we might entertain a question if somebody would, if there were questions from our participants. You could just either raise your hand and speak up or put it in the chat if there is a question. Yes, go ahead. I can't see you. Minette?
Yes.
Minette?
Yes.
Thanks, sorry.
Good evening and good morning, everyone. I am Minette from the Philippines. I work directly with grassroots communities, especially those who are hard hit by disasters. I've been doing this for almost 45 years since I left university. I would like to add an additional point with a colleague who gave a situation on the Philippines. No, I put also in the chat box. In the last 10 years, we who are development and humanitarian NGOs have been the target of attacks. This was not the case like 35 years ago. But now we suffer and are persecuted from all forms of attack. You know, red tagging is a very general term. So I will give examples of how we in the humanitarian world are attacked. We have death threats. We see our faces on social media. In fact, in 2020, myself and a bishop from the United Church of the Philippines, some people made posters about us, linking us to the armed terrorists. And these posters were all over our province, trying to ruin our reputation in the community and in the people we serve. And the irony is, this is very particular, Ms. Patricia, no, and the colleagues. We in the NGO community who are not even political activists, but development and humanitarian NGOs, we comply with all the stiff government policies and compliance, like the Securities and Exchange Commission, the Bureau of Internal Revenue. We're good. And we have even concrete partnerships with the government, with the mayors, with the governors, and even national government agencies. And for us, we even get awards from the government. So it's so ironic that we are being targeted. And me, who has been a recipient of some awards from the government and even international women leadership awards, I'm now facing a charge in court. I'm being charged of financing terrorism just because we serve in the areas where the rebels are active, because that's where the poor people are, and the huge gap that the government has in terms of emergency aid, livelihood, we fill in that gap. And but even then, as I put in the chat box, we are already 64 NGO leaders, not including the farmer leaders, the fisher folk leaders. In the NGO circle, we're already 64, facing charges in court. It's good that I have the chance now to speak to you because I'm just out on bail. I had to raise $10,000 for my temporary release because a warrant of arrest was issued for me in February this year, just 2 months ago. So I couldn't imagine. It's really also mental health issues for us who are facing this, that you see your name on a court document and it says your name versus people of the Philippines. That's how it is in court. And it's really contrary to what we're really doing, helping government and helping poor people. That's why I'm very inspired by the teachings and of Pope Francis, talking about living for others and being kind and being happy, but being better when you make others happy because of what you did. So it's a difficult situation, and our bank accounts were frozen for 1 year, all our organizational accounts and even our personal accounts. So that's the particular persecution that we're also experiencing. They cut off our access to basic needs, food, payment for electricity. We're surviving on meager donations, me and my team. But we want to go on with our work for the poor. And this is really hindering us and affecting our families and mental health as well. That's why I try to be visible in ICHRP. I attended the ICHRP conference in Hong Kong in 2019, and I hosted an ICHRP team who came for integration here in our region in Samar and Leyte. But since 2019, it's gotten worse. No, so I'm really thankful to the ICHRP foreign partners who are very active in supporting the Philippine issues. Rest assured, my message is rest assured that we who are here in the Philippines, in the grassroots, will really be strong and steadfast in serving the poor, deprived, and oppressed, no matter what the persecution. We'll stand up for justice. We'll stand up for truth until what we believe that God's kingdom of justice and peace is achieved on earth, even not in our lifetime, but for the future generations. So thank you very much, ICHRP colleagues, for supporting us. Thank you. Salamat.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Minette. And we offer our support to you. And that's why this conference in Rome is so critical, and for us to seek peace with justice. Yes, there's another hand up, Kirk Van Camperhoff. I'm not even going to try the last.
Yeah, it's Dutch, Dirk van Kampenhout, but it's very hard to pronounce. That is, yeah, from the Netherlands, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, I heard a lot of stories. It's all very true. And then in the conference, we continue discussing about it. And it seems to be it is very hard to find a solution for all those problems in the Philippines. And we are based in the Netherlands here. And yeah, recently Duterte came to the prison in Scheveningen. And we are following it up, and there's a lot of Filipinos here living in the Netherlands, and they believe in Duterte. So they have a rally close to the prison, having barbecue like that, and food eating, and then support of Duterte. So we are facing that problem, and the phone was ringing. Sorry. So that's one thing, and there's a lot of news about Duterte which is not true, but even people who seems to be normal people in the Netherlands, Filipinos and their husbands, and I think Duterte is a good president. So that the things he did in the Philippines was necessary to solve the crime problem. So. And you see it a lot in the social media, and they're doing it very well, very professional. So that's one thing I want to say. So during the day of the arrival of Duterte, I was in The Hague, and but he came later. So I was very early in The Hague in the prison, and but he came 12 hours later, and but I was able to talk to one of the lawyers, that is Mr. Andres, and then yeah, we get along, but and then finally when he arrived in the prison in The Hague, there was a lot of people, and yeah, it was good I was not there because all supporters. So,
well, thank you, Dirk, for your comments and your support, and I really appreciate it. And there's one more hand, and Tim, I would suggest.
Yeah, sorry, it's a long story.
No problem. I'm just thinking about time. That's why I'm kind of fine. Sorry. Tim, do you have a question or is it a comment? Because we really only have time for a question if it's a quick one. I don't want to miss your...
It's a question. It's a quick one. Yeah. This is to Marie Claude Manga, because I want to ask her, how can the Faith Network here best respond to the attacks that are going on against the NGO community and also against the individuals as yourself in those communities? What can we do here that would be the best response?
Where are you, Tim, exactly?
I am in Durham, North Carolina. I'm a member of the Ecumenical Advocacy Network on the Philippines.
Okay, so you mean what can we do abroad to help our partners in the...
Yes,
Yeah.
thank you for clarifying.
I mean,
Yes.
so you want Minette to answer that, or who are you
Yes.
asking? Hedge
Yes,
or?
Yes, Marie.
Yes,
Mhm.
thank you for that
Um,
question.
Just Minette, may I
Yes.
just suggest to keep a quick answer because our
Sure.
time is kind of slipping away.
Okay.
That's all.
Yes,
Thank you.
thank you, Patricia. Yes, one thing that you can do in your country is to write letters of concern to the Philippine embassies based in your country. We've had experience that these letters, like the one by a support group in Belgium written to the Philippine embassy some years back, they deterred death threats for our farmer leaders. No, there was some link. So that's one thing you can do, please. We will send you the information through perhaps ICHRP Secretariat, if that's possible, and then
Yeah.
write letters of concern, please, to the Philippine embassies so they know that there are people concerned, friends concerned in other countries. Yes,
Okay,
thank
thank
you.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. And I hate to cut people off. This is very rich and important conversation. And this is what solidarity is all about, being able to share information, but then reflect on it and ask questions. And so I thank you all for joining us, but I do have a couple of calls to follow up on Dirk's or Tim's question of what we can do. First of all, you can join us in Rome for this very important conference where we'll actually be able to sit down and have a much more in-depth conversation. And as Joyous, Deaconess Joyous has pointed out, is that that some of our folk from the Philippines will be there in Rome, accompanying us in Rome, and we'll have a chance to chat. But also the Rome conference is not just gathering to support each other, but also designing and implementing steps of action to carry forward into the new year, into the following year. The second call that we could for action would be to defend the human rights in the Philippines through the IOM, the International Observatory Mission, International Observers Mission for the midterm election. I'll get that right, all in one sentence. And just pointing out, and Minette has mentioned that the red tagging is a key aspect of this election, and red tagging is meant to deter and to sow fear into the voters so that they vote for the more powerful rather than the right people for the election. And so that if you would like more information on the IOM, please visit the ICHRP global website, and there's more information and statements about that action. The second call, the third call is to really encourage foreign military intervention, particularly around asking our governments who are involved in this, and there's many, the US, Canada, Australia, there's many governments involved, the Balikatan military exercises happening in the South China Sea, that these operations are just intended and will probably escalate threats of sovereignty in the South China Sea. And again, for more information on action around the Balikatan and what we can do with those who are not in the Philippines, please visit our ICHRP website, and there's more information, more detailed articles and statements on those military actions. Also, I would call people of faith and that who are not members of ICHRP, International Coalition for Human Rights in the Philippines, to seek out your local chapters of ICHRP. And there's many chapters in the United States, Canada, Australia, Italy, places in Europe, as you've heard, in the Netherlands, the UK. Please join those groups, because as you can see, it is through this network and solidarity work that we're able to lift up these causes and to take action and to support our partners, our siblings in the Philippines. And as we come to a close, again, I thank you for joining us, and to remember this year of the Jubilee is a year of hope, and that hope leads us into a year of action where just peace is lifted up and that truth is spoken to power. And this will happen in solidarity when we stand together. So long live international solidarity. So thank you all very much for joining me today. Take care.